I'm Robin Bennett, and Susan Briggs is over there on the other screen. And we are co-founders of the Dog Gurus. And the Dog Gurus is a pet care business, staff training, and business consulting company. We help pet care businesses launch, grow, and profit. I will say we need to start out with taking a deep breath and just realizing that this is a process that you want to build systems around. And I think most people roll their eyes when Susan and I say that. Like, a system around like rewards and encouragement and fun is basically what it boils down to. And a lot of people, let's face it, building systems in your business is really hard to begin with. It takes time. And so things get put on the back burner all the time. And when it comes to making sure that dogs are taken care of, I think most pet care facilities are really good about building those processes, because obviously you want to make sure the dogs are safe who are being dropped off in your care. But then you also want to make sure that your staff is being taken care of. So you also need to spend just as much time figuring out what kind of systems are you going to use and process are you going to put in place to make sure that you're taking care of your team. And it's more than just an annual review. I'm talking about something totally different that is not related to that annual review or performance appraisal, which a lot of people call it. It's more about just exactly how do you get your team to function as a team, to have fun as a team, to engage as a team, to help you in your business as well. So I'll throw it to Susan. Do you have any starting points on that?
I think a great point you made is having the system, but that means you have to make the time. And I think a lot of times we stay so focused on the pet and the next thing, the next step that's coming up, that we don't stop and take time to celebrate and have fun. And that just gets to be exhausting. You and I know that when we just keep going from one thing to the next and there's never a break or a pause to really celebrate, that your joy gets sucked out of what you're doing because it becomes such I don't know, it's just you're a machine instead of a person, and we are people. And so we need that time to be social and to celebrate and just relax a little bit and celebrate success. So one thing I did learn in my business was, like, after some of the peak holidays, so like after spring break, after Thanksgiving, I would come back into the office because there would always be things that would happen. And so I would try to temper my expectation about, okay, were all the animals safe? Were the clients happy? And if those were in yes, then we had a pretty good peak period. Let's celebrate that. We can fix things for the next one, but let's take some time to just celebrate that we made it through this. And for a lot of you guys, this is spring break's going to be your first real full occupancy that you've had in a long time. And so I think it's going to be really important that you just pause and find a way to celebrate and thank the team for being there and giving their best, because it could also be the first time some of these team members have seen the business operate at full occupancy, and just talk about how it went, get their input on what maybe could be done better for the next time, which may be Memorial Day coming up.
Yeah, and I think just something as simple as thanking your team for doing a good job is really valuable. And I know a lot of us tend to think it's their job and we should expect them to do it. And why should I thank them for that? That's what I hired them for. I'm paying them for it. There's a million reasons you could argue why you shouldn't have to do something as simple as thanking somebody. But the reality is that means a ton to your employees when you genuinely care and understand what they've gone through and thank them for it. And I think especially those employees, for instance, that have stuck with you through COVID, through the crazy times, the ups, the downs, possibly in situations where they weren't totally comfortable because they weren't sure if they wanted to work around people who could potentially pass COVID on to them, really making sure they understand the value that how much that meant to you for those people who have been around all that time. And then, like Susan said, if you have a peak period like spring break, obviously, taking the time to say thank you guys so much for doing all of this. I know we just came off of a really busy season because we have the March Madness education program going right now. And in February, we had the daycare games, which takes a ton of time and energy on one particular staff member who works with us, Amy. And we did say thank you to Amy. We sent her a gift card to say, this is you, like, yeah, this is your job and we pay you to do this, but we also know it's not a ton of work, and we really appreciate it and all that she does behind the scenes. And so we just took an extra time to say thank you for her in front of our whole team. And then we also sent her a gift card to use at Amazon to just say, hey, celebrate and have fun yourselves and spend this however you want. So those little kinds of things like that, I think, are really, really important to recognize. And I think first you do have to be and this is something I feel like Susan has taught me more and more about, is you have to be conscious of making sure you stop to do that celebration. Because as Susan mentioned, and I'm like totally like this, I get done with something and I'm like, yay, it's done, move on. So really teaching yourself to pause and have those celebrations. For those, we saw lots of people doing wonderful celebrations during the daycare games for facilities that participated. And I love seeing that, because you were posting on social media how much fun your team was having. You were posting the gold medals and silver and bronze medals that your team won. You were sharing all of that in your email newsletters. And then everyone always tells us our staff loves when we do the daycare games. Guess what? It's partly because look how much recognition they get from you for doing it, and obviously from the clients and everybody who reads your Facebook page or your newsletter or whatever. So those things are really important, and you want to really build those into what you're doing with your staff. So I would say the other thing that's really important is looking at your staff outside of just what they provide your business. And this, I think, is really a next level leadership from my opinion. And like first level leadership is you train them, you hire the right people, you train them to do their job, you monitor what they're doing in your job, and you're rewarding their success in your job. But that's all about what they're doing for your business. I think the next level of leadership is what we should all strive for, which is, do you know your employees? Do you know what they really like outside of your business? And not only that, do you know about their family, about their dogs? Do you know individual issues that are coming up that you can talk to them about? And really, do you care about your employees outside of what they do for your business? And then, and even to take that even farther, can you help them reach any of their goals? And if you have an employee that really loves, let's say, photography, can you help them with that somehow? Can you provide them opportunities to use that skill? Or can you give them a gift for an employee? That might be that you give them a day off to go attend some kind of photography conference for a day. Little things like that where you're really showing an interest in them, I think, are really valuable.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, because the more you can figure out and be flexible with maybe some job responsibilities to tap into people's personal passions, and if there's a way to let them apply that in your business and have some flexibility in what their job structure looks like, will help them be more engaged and motivated. Because motivation, I think, is something that has to come from within. It's very hard to motivate someone else. And if you think about what are the things that motivate you, it's probably something that you feel very passionate about, that you have a strong desire to do, that doesn't feel like work. And if you can bring that in, either through the person aligning with what you're doing for the business, or letting one of their personal hobbies and passions be part of their job, that's going to go a long ways towards engagement and long-term employment with you. So you need to show some flexibility. And like Robin said, do you really know them as an individual, and what do they like, and what are they aspiring to outside of your business roles?
Yeah, and I think when we talk about really the one thing I think that's really most important to creating a successful team culture, it is that everybody has to care about everybody else. And you, as the business owner or general manager, but usually it's the owner, this would be true of the general manager too, but you have to care about your employees as people, not just as employees. And I think when you start to do that and you truly, genuinely care and want to help them succeed, that they're going to recognize that. It's a totally different style of leadership. And it's not meaning that you're going to be their friend or their best buddy. Like, there's still policies and procedures they need to follow. There's still accountability that needs to be there, but it's also a matter of everything you're doing to help them, including firing them if you have to, all has to do with what's in the best interest of that employee. And I know that maybe firing someone is in their best interest seems like a weird thing, but honestly, if you have employees that don't work well in your culture or they're toxic to your culture, the best thing you could do for that employee is let them go and let them learn what they need to learn to become a better employee in some other business. And I think that's also taking care of your team, because your team is not, it's like the good example is when we talk about play groups and we say all dogs in the play groups have to be having fun. Like the one dog that's bullying, he's having fun, but the dogs he's bullying are not having fun. And so it becomes that toxic environment in a play group. It's the same thing. So in the dog play group, we would say that dog that's being a bully, this is not the best environment for him. And it's in our best interest to tell that pet parent, hey, we're going to do something else with this dog. We're not going to do daycare with them because he's not really having fun. It's not the best environment for him. And all the other dogs in daycare are going to be happy that dog is not there. It's the same thing with your staff. If you have a staff member that's really not doing well and you've coached them and they're just not the right fit, the best thing you can do is find another place for that person. And it might not be in your organization, but it's still the kindest thing. And it's also the kindest thing for the rest of your team who might be feeling the repercussions from that kind of toxic environment. So I do think really caring about your team as a whole and that all those individuals is one of the most important things you could do as a leader with a team of staff. And I will say that in the pet care industry, we do tend to get really close to our teams because we are working together a lot of hours in one location with those dogs. So when you don't have somebody that fits well in that culture, it really affects everybody, affects the whole team.
Yeah, it truly does. And I think the other thing that's so important is you've really got to over communicate and create a safe place for employees to share what's on their mind. You can help them couch that in a positive way. We try to say if you're going to bring a problem, also bring a solution, but you need to listen and they need to feel like their ideas have merit and are being considered, even if you don't adopt them. And you can always go back and explain why maybe it wouldn't work and thank them for bringing the idea to you. That's the way you get people to be more encouraged and engaged, is you've got to have really good communication to where they feel heard and they feel like it's safe to say something.
Yeah, and I think some of the biggest challenges I think in terms of people being feeling empowered that they can share what their ideas might be is making sure that is a culture that you're building throughout your team and throughout your facility. And what I mean by that is if you have I've been in meetings where this has happened before. So we have a meeting and I'm just maybe sitting in because I'm consulting or whatever. And the owner might be saying, like, look, we want your feedback. We want to hear from you. We want to know all your great ideas. And then someone brings up an idea, and either the manager or it could be another employee, it might be the owner themselves, immediately say why they can't do that. Okay, so I'm guilty of this totally because I'm just quick to be like, get to the chase. Okay, no, that's not going to work. But if you do that, you have to be really conscious of saying, if you're going to ask for ideas, you have to be really conscious of saying every idea is worth considering. And maybe you write it up there. Like the worst possible thing, I've been in meetings where this has happened too. Okay, we're going to brainstorm. We're going to write down everyone's idea. And then, a few people share ideas, you write them down, and then someone shares an idea and you're like, that won't work. And you don't even write it down. That will put a halt in that person ever recommending anything again. And I will tell you, this was a lesson I did have to learn with my team when I opened my daycare, is that I was really quick to ask for their input. And if they had what I considered a really good idea, I was really quick to implement it. But I was also really quick to just make a snap judgment of saying, no, that's not going to work. And even if I was correct in that assumption, it's the worst way to handle it by just shutting the person down immediately. So every opinion you have to really take into consideration and have that culture, and the rest of your team has to agree to this, because you can also shut people down by maybe the owner is saying it's a great idea, but somebody else on your team is that will never work. You just have to make the rule of, we're brainstorming now. Rules during brainstorm are everything goes up on the table, everything goes up on the board or whatever. So you really want to build that culture, and you do want to ask for your team for input, and you do want to be receptive to it. Some of the best things we ever implemented at my facility were things that my employees brought to me. Because I'm telling you, your employees really do have ideas on how to run more effectively, more efficiently. Now, once you have all those ideas together, you can talk about which ones might work best. You can talk about why maybe one would cost too much and you couldn't afford to do it right now, or whatever. There would be valid reasons for choosing one or over the other. But that conversation can happen after the brainstorming conversation. And that's the best way to get those problem solvers that you really want. Everybody wants people who, why do they bring me that question? I just want them to solve the issue. But you have to actually empower your team to do that, and getting them to bring suggestions to you, not shutting them down. And even when they do get empowered and you say, okay, here's what I want you to go ahead and solve this problem. Maybe they don't solve it 100% the same way you do. It's you still want to recognize that they did a great job and they solved it. And then maybe in a different conversation, you say, hey, if that ever happens again, here's another thing you could consider doing, and maybe give them other ideas. But I think those types of problem solving situations are going to be really helpful long term, because you end up with a team that solves the problems themselves rather than bringing everything to you.
And another important thing to communicate, if you really want people to make decisions and be empowered, is let them know what their boundaries are. What can they make decisions on? If there's an amount that they can give to a client that's upset if something went wrong, what is their parameters for that? Just let them know what their boundaries are. And that helps tremendously. But that means you've got to think about it and help explain and make sure they understand where the boundaries are of their decision making power. Because otherwise, you get to where they don't make any decisions unless they check with you or the manager or supervisor, which is not a very empowering or engaging place to work, because then you're just micromanaging, and people, your 18 players won't stay for that.
Yeah, and Peggy said a rule of brainstorming: never criticize or discount anyone's idea. It's so true. I love that. And I will agree with what Susan just said, in that figure out those situations where employees bring you questions. And most of the time it has to do with how they're relating to clients, or maybe a client is upset. I can tell you, because I've been on this side of the equation, where in other businesses where I was not the owner, if somebody brings a problem or a complaint, and my response is, I don't really know what to do about that. Let me check with the business owner, or let me check with whoever. It's an awful feeling for me too. So your employees don't like that either. They don't like to tell the person who's mad, who may be, upset and standing in front of them, they can't help. They don't want to be in the position where they're like, yeah, I don't know what to do, but I'll let someone know about it. What you want to do is figure out what are those most common situations. And usually it's something you can just tell your staff, look, if somebody's upset, you have my permission to go up to, maybe it's $25, maybe it's $50, and give them something. Maybe it's a free day of daycare, maybe it's a free training class, or a free evaluation, or whatever. Like, just pick a few things. So here, when I've mentioned this before, here's what everybody always says. They're like, I don't want to give my employees all that free reign. They're going to be giving things away left and right. I have never seen that happen. Most of the time, your employee is freaking out that you just gave them that permission, and they will use it very judiciously. That's what I've always found. I've never found a situation where, because you've told an employee, hey, if anyone's upset, just give them a free bag of treats or a free Kong. I've never seen any single facility or business ever where this employee is just like willy-nilly giving away, tens and 20s bags of treats or Kongs.
Yeah.
But you've just empowered them to help the problem that's right in front of them. And it doesn't cost you much at all. And so it's way better for them to have that kind of empowerment than to have to bring every little thing to you or to the general manager or whatever.
It will save you time and headache. And as Robin said, if they can solve that problem right away, then the client doesn't go away stewing about and being disappointed that they weren't really heard and helped at the point when they first brought the issue up. And that can save you a lot. If you think about how much it cost you to get one client, and if you lose them because you weren't willing to give 50 or even $100. I'm sure all of us would give $100 to keep a good client. Think about that as you're setting your boundaries. And you can do role play and talk about scenarios. You guys have use your experience in your business. What kinds of things come up? And use that as examples and role plays of having those discussions and how you can present the information on what that boundary is to make the client happy. Or what can they do if they've run out of things, and let's say you do special concretes and you're out of an ingredient. Do they know what to do? Are they empowered to go to the store and get more ingredients so that you can fulfill the orders that you have for that product? It's playing those things out. As I would look at all the problems and frustrations that come across your desk as opportunities to improve your system and empower your team to handle that so it doesn't have to come to your desk the next time.
Yeah, and I love the idea of doing the role plays and just have team meetings where they're like, hey, we're going to talk about what if this happens, XYZ. And it's something that you've seen, that you've experienced, because Susan said, you guys already know what your most common questions or issues come up. So role play that. And you can role play, what would you say if the client has this complaint or that complaint? And your team may come up with ideas that you hadn't even thought of, which I think is awesome. But then you can, that's also a great opportunity to say, where some of the boundaries might be. So maybe one team member has one idea and another has another, then another idea you can talk about. Here's the one that would maybe be best. So let's all agree to use this one. So it's a really good way to help them come up with solutions as well. And it does cause your whole team to start thinking of solutions rather than problems. And so we love to tell people, if you're going to bring in a problem to me, bring the solution with you. It's everything is solution based. Don't just be the kind of person where everyone brings in the problem and you solve, you solve, you solve. For entrepreneurs, that is our mindset. I know for me, like when someone brings me something, before I even know if they have a problem, they'll tell me the issue. Before I even know if they've solved it, I'm telling them how to solve it. That's just, it's just how I am. It's how my makeup is. So I have to be really conscious when someone brings a problem to me. I'm waiting to see, are they actually going to tell me how to solve this, or did they already solve it? Can I just shut my mouth and let them finish the conversation? Because I know that's how a lot of us entrepreneurs are. But making sure you're changing that tone to say, look, if I want to hear what challenges you guys are facing, but also I want to hear what you would recommend to solve it. Otherwise, you never get out of the being the problem solver. You want your team to be the problem solver. The other thing I'll say really quick is, you also need to make sure that when your team does do something out of the box and they do solve a problem for a client, that you're recognizing that.
Yeah.
So make sure that at the next team meeting, you're like, hey, I just want to thank Julie, because the other day Miss Smith was really upset and Julie did XYZ and it was awesome. And so making sure that Julie is getting recognized for taking that action in front of the whole team is really important. And you could do that in a meeting, or you can do that putting something on your internal communication or whatever. But the point is, you want to make sure that you're raising that level of problem solving up to the whole team so they recognize that's valuable to your team and to your culture. So you want to look at that as well. So Peggy said, we've been doing after hours Zoom meetings to engage our team, where they pay and they do committees on hot topics like summer uniforms. So I love that. This is a great way for your team to come up with ideas that they want. And uniforms can be very controversial. So
Right.
I actually did love to have my team talking about, what do they want? What are my goals? My goals usually were, I want to look professional and I want to set a good image and I want it to match our brand. And then the staff is more focused usually on, I don't want to wash it a lot because it gets so dirty and I don't want these colors or whatever. Comfortability is a huge one. And then just personal styles comes into play. But I love that rather than you just creating the policy and then sending it down to your staff, like, here's what we're going to all wear, you get some of their feedback and some input from them. So I love that. I think that's a great idea. So what else, Susan?
Let's see. We talked about, do you wish your whole team operated more as a well-oiled machine? And I know that can be challenging because there always seems to be like the front of the house, back of the house conflict, or I know even in my business, we had the weekday versus weekend pet care. And
Yeah, we had dog training team versus dog daycare team. All
yeah,
these little silos that get built for
yeah,
whatever reason. You could have kennel versus daycare, same thing.
yeah. And the one way we started breaking through to where there were, again, it comes back to communication. We overlapped shifts. So, like, weekend people were working with weekday and trying to do a handoff, but we also did like supervisor or manager meetings that crossed all those different silos and had them in the room together. And we would talk about issues and key points of how everybody was working together for the team. And the other thing that's so important is those written SOPs, because it would be like they do it different than we do. And everybody should be doing it the same if you're following your SOP. So it's making sure that accountability is there. And so you you really have to foster that communication between groups and not let anything fester. Get it resolved.
Yeah, and I think the SOPs are really critical because even though you have differences between the within all those silos, you still have common things that they're doing on both teams. And that's what we saw with training the training staff who was there, usually dog training staff who was usually there in the evenings, and then the daycare staff who was obviously there during the day. And invariably they would complain about how each of them was leaving the building. And
Yeah.
so we had an SOP that said, this is what the building looks like when you leave it. And everybody agreed to that, and everybody started adhering to that. And that took away the whole conversation of the daycare leaves it one way, and then the trainers come in and they have to move all the equipment to do the training, and then they don't put it back. And then we just made a policy with everybody's input to say, this is what it needs to look like with both groups leaving. And all of those SOPs become really important. The other thing we found was the more you can have meetings that involve overlapping silos, the better. So there are going to be times when maybe you just want to talk to your kennel team, or maybe you just want to talk to the front of the house. But the more that you can have meetings that the information you're passing along is pertinent to the whole team and their silos are overlapping, the better, because it goes back to just good communication, but it also goes back to just human nature is if we're with somebody in the same room. Facebook is a really good example of this. Stuff on Facebook that there is no way that person who posted that would have said that to the person face to face. It's just human nature that when we become and when we get put right in front of another person, we're going to tone down how we say things. We're going to tone our response a little bit. We're going to hear things differently maybe, and we just become friends with those people. And so then there is an idea of we want to work together. So you want to foster all of that. If you're having a lot of really individualized meetings and you're finding that those teams are arguing between each other, I would really look at how you can do a little bit more in terms of joint team training to get people to know one another a little bit differently. And that's been challenging because of COVID. I know we've had a lot of different policies for COVID, but as things start opening up, I would definitely take a look at that to have that team working together more consistently. But they really do need to get to know each other as well, at least
Yeah.
enough that they feel like they have friends on the team and they're not all arguing against each other.
And you have to look at the time you invest in that, is that it's going to pay off in better teamwork and more efficiency down the road. Because I think a lot of times we're just so busy with the daily operations and fires. It's like, I don't have time to have a meeting. They're just going to have to work it out. It's going to get worse, and you're going to have less productivity because they're not going to work it out. The leaders need to step in and force the communication and getting on the same page. And so some of these things, it seems like you don't have time, but if you make the time for it, it's going to save time down the road.
Yeah, and we would say to set up some routine scheduled meetings that you have anyway. So then it's a matter of taking a note down to say at the next meeting, we're going to talk about this and this. So as those things come up, you don't have to necessarily, unless it's something that is dangerous to the dogs or whatever, you don't have to address it right that second. But if you know that in 3 weeks we have a scheduled team meeting, you just jot that down and say that's going to be on the agenda. And then I'll say one of my pet peeves, I'm just going to throw this one out, is I would also avoid having those meetings where the whole point of the meeting is to talk about a policy that maybe one person is doing wrong.
Mhm.
But rather than talking to that one person, you're going to have a whole team meeting about how you shouldn't do XYZ. Let me tell you, your team knows you're only talking to Julie over there who's screwing it up every day. And they feel like, why don't you just talk to Julie? Because she's the only one ever does that. Like, I know we all think we're trying to be we're trying to be nice by saying we won't talk to Julie. We'll just reestablish this policy for everybody. It is not a secret to your team. Like, they know that it's that one person's the who you're having that entire team meeting for, and that kind of a meeting will actually create worse culture than a better culture. So if there's one person that's doing something that really needs to be coached and helped, just pull that person aside and save your meetings from doing more of the things that everybody actually does need to know, which then obviously also leads more time for praise and compliments and brainstorming and working together as a team rather than having six people sitting there going, I do this right. And then half the time, I'm telling you, half the time, the one person you're talking to doesn't get that it's them anyway,
Yeah.
which is the other frustrating thing. So,
The other thing that's good to do is in some of your team meetings, especially if it's across silos, is doing some things to get to know everybody at a little deeper level, because the more you understand where someone's coming from, and there's some great exercises, you can just Google team building exercises and you'll get a lot of ideas. But the more you get team members get to know each other and their backgrounds and that decision thought process, the more they'll have patience and understanding and will communicate better. So building some of that into frequent team meetings is important too.
yeah, and I'll just throw out one really simple one. And I know we're going to be wrapping up in a second, but I'm in a chorus of about 70 other women. And so we've been doing Zoom meetings, but we do the same thing when we are in person rehearsing. Is the director always starts out with just throwing out there, who has good news to share.
Mhm.
And it seems kind of hokey. Like when I first went to chorus, I was like, what's this all about? But now it's actually one of my favorite parts of either the Zoom meeting or the chorus, because I've learned all kinds of things. I've learned people whose nephews or kids or grandkids are getting married. I've learned somebody that was able to get her whole family together, which now I know she's got three brothers and sisters that just came in from town. Like, I just learn all these interesting things because they're just good news. It has nothing to do with the chorus. So it would be the same thing. It would have nothing to do with your business, but you might find out that someone's son or daughter or niece or nephew or whatever is pregnant. You might find out that somebody just got a new puppy. Like, it's just really fun. And again, it gets people to know each other on a different level. So I just think that's a super simple one to do.
That's a great one.
So, we do that with 70 people, and everybody, usually there's 5 to 6. So it's not everybody talks every time, but it is a fun way to just do an icebreaker.
And this is a journey. This is not something that you're going to do one thing and it's going to fix it. This really is something that as leaders that you just always continue to work at and try new things and figure out what's working for the dynamics of your team and culture. But don't give up, because there's a lot of different ideas and you will make progress.